How high is Sanji's ceiling? Now we know by the end of the series the Strats will probably be the strongest crew of all time, surpassing legends like Rox and Roger, and Sanji is a part of the big three within the crew alongside Zoro and Luffy, but his path isn't as clear as those two. We know that Zoro will surpass people like Mihawk and eventually Silver's Rayleigh, whereas Luffy will surpass legendary pirates like Roger, Rox, Whitebeard, etc., becoming one of the best to ever live. But the same cannot be said for our cook. We don't necessarily have anyone that we can compare him to get a gauge of how strong he will become and how high his bounty will be by the end of the series. Unlike Zoro and Luffy, his goal has never been to become the strongest of anything. All he really wants is to protect his friends and to find the All Blue. Of course we can compare him to Scopper Gabon, but we don't even know how strong he is. We just know he's powerful based off the rank he has within the crew, being the number 3. We don't even know his bounty or if he's even alive right now. Now Oda has doubled down, tripled down that Sanji is the number 3 of the crew, always has and always will. Him and Zoro have been even called the wings of the Pirate King, as they are obviously the left and right of Luffy, the two strongest after him. We know Zoro will surpass Mihawk sooner or later and probably put him around Emperor level whether you like it or not, and Luffy will surpass all of that by becoming the Pirate King, one of the strongest pirates to ever live. But we don't really know much about Sanji and where he's going to be heading to by the end of the series, so today we're going to figure that out, just how strong Sanji will be by the end of the series and what his bounty might potentially be. So just how high is Sanji's ceiling? Well, it's going to be a lot higher than a lot of us could ever imagine. Now for us to understand how powerful he'll be by the end of the series, we gotta talk about just how strong he is currently, and right now Sanji is nuts. He's easily one of the fastest characters in the entirety of the series, outspeeding a laser and saving Edison and Egghead, but also moving so fast you can't see or hear him, looking as if he's invisible. He has great observation haki, even better when used on women, and his durability is easily one of the best in the entire series, as he can take bullets to the head and take no damage. He took a punch from the Seraphim Jinbei and had virtually no damage, even getting his body crushed by Queen's most powerful attack, only for him to regenerate and put his bones back into place. Right now, Sanji is absolutely crazy, and we haven't even talked about his new hotter flames, the blue fire, the Ifrit Jambe, which easily dispatched Queen. In a nutshell, Sanji is very scary, and he hasn't even reached his full potential and has a lot more room to grow, but he's gotten so powerful that many fans already believe he's stronger than some of the first commanders. Now this isn't what I think, this is just what I've seen online through polls and discussions. But because Sanji was able to dodge Katakuri, he used Future Sight, as well as take almost no damage from King when he was in the raid suit, and this was prior to him awakening, where he's gotten faster, more durable, and stronger. People kind of believe that he's at least on the same level as them, as he's more or less just a faster or slightly weaker version of King, and honestly, that does kind of make sense. Similar to Marco, he was able to fight King and Queen simultaneously by himself and stall them for a few moments, and this was prior to him awakening. Again, Sanji has not reached his full potential and still has a lot more room to grow, and the fact that him and Zoro are commanders now, this just proves that they're gonna be monsters in the near future. And I'm not gonna lie, I always thought that Sanji's peak would be Admiral level, but honestly, him and Zoro aren't that far off from that power. In fact, give them an arc or two, they'll probably even surpass that of an Admiral. I mentioned earlier there's not really anyone for us to compare Sanji with for us to grasp how strong he will be in the future. That was kind of a lie, as there is a comparison we can make, and that is of course with Roronoa Zoro, the other wing of the Pirate King, and also the right and left hand of basically any pirate crew out there, as most of the time the second and third strongest of a crew is usually more or less similar in strength to one another, with the best case scenario, although they're not a crew, was CP9 with Jabra and Kanku. They were not that far off from one another and were usually comparable and had their own little rivalry going on, similar to Zoro and Sanji. There's King and Queen. These guys were more or less comparable to one another, even their bounties were pretty near each other. And of course, there's the legendary Silver's Rayleigh and Scopper Gabon. Silver, Copper, second, third place. These guys are pretty comparable in strength, even though we don't know much about about Scopper, we do know for a fact he was the third strongest within the crew. And so because of this, Sanji most likely won't be that far off in power with Zoro, and they even have a gag going on with their bounties, as one is sometimes higher than the other or not that far apart. So don't be surprised that by the end of the series, both of these guys have a very similar bounty, maybe even the exact same. I hope that happens at least once in the series because that'd be so funny, but most likely Zoro will have a higher bounty with Sanji being slightly less than his. Throw in the Wings of the Pirate King, their comparable bounties, them being the second and third strongest in the crew. It's clear as day that Oda's really trying to push that these guys are pretty comparable in strength. So wherever Zoro is, Sanji is not that far behind, at least I would think so. When it comes to Sanji's power, it's always been connected and reflective of his emotional state. Quite literally, his flames come from his burning passion. It wasn't until he had his inner crisis and came to terms with things when fighting Queen that he got his power up. And that's quite literally been the whole point of his character. That's why Sora did the sacrifice so Sanji could keep his emotions, where Judge thought being emotionless is what makes a true soldier, when in fact it's your emotions that makes you stronger. That's why hockey is so important. It's based off of your own willpower and your literal emotions. That's why Sanji is stronger and will surpass all of his siblings and his family, proving Judge wrong. But I always believe that it's not until Sanji comes to terms with himself and accepts everything about him, his lineage and his bloodline, that he'll finally reach his full potential and unlock a new level of power. Oda has shown us several times within the series through Kaido, King, and of course the infamous fight between Ace and Akainu that magma is the final form and most powerful state of fire, as it's more superior than flames. How that makes sense, I couldn't tell you. But with Sanji possibly having Lunarian blood in him due to the lineage factor, it is possible that Sanji's final power-up could be lava based, giving him the hottest form of flames within the series. There's a couple of power-ups that Sanji could get in the future, such as even hotter flames like a white fire, better observation, maybe getting future sight or a technique we haven't seen before, maybe even Conqueror's Haki. That is also on the table. I wouldn't be surprised, but I also wouldn't be mad if he never got it. But if he were to get it, maybe he can even get advanced Conqueror's Haki. If Zoro can do it, then I don't see why Sanji can't. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't get it. It wouldn't make me lose any sleep. He can get even faster, moving at the speed of light, or even faster than that. He can get another raid suit, which would make him broken. He can get Lunarian-like abilities, as it's hinted he might have Lunarian blood. The sky is the limit. But now that we're in the final saga of One Piece, we got a clear understanding of where things are heading to. The first part right now is finding the One Piece with all the emperors making a claim for it, and we all know that eventually the Straw Hats will be fighting the Blackbeard Pirates, with most likely each member having their own individual fights, and I'm pretty certain that Zoro will be fighting Shiryu and Luffy will be fighting Blackbeard. But with Sanji, it's a bit of an unknown, with the only acceptable answer right now being Kuzan. It's a bit of a hard pill to swallow, I know. I can't imagine Sanji beating him, but at the same time, he's a commander right now and you can only get higher from here. But also, if he's not fighting Kuzan, I can't imagine anyone else on the crew being able to, so Sanji is the only one that makes sense so far. But there is a little subplot that could connect the two, and that being Charlotte Pudding. If you remember, Kuzan and Van Augur were the ones who kidnapped her from Whole Cake Island, and we know that she was gonna marry Sanji, and they have a little bit of a complicated relationship going on, and I doubt that Sanji is gonna let this slide once he finds out, or once both crews confront one another. These guys are also polar opposites. Fire versus ice I think is a pretty good matchup, and we do know the Blackbeard Pirates are pretty much parallels or dark reflections of the Straw Hat Pirates. But even if that doesn't happen, eventually Sanji will be fighting an admiral, as the story has hinted many times that there's going to be a final war taking place against the world government after someone finds the One Piece and learns the truth. So in that sense, Sanji will be fighting one of the three admirals, as I'm assuming Luffy will be fighting Akainu, the fleet admiral. But there's even beyond that, as the real enemies will be the Gorosei and the Celestial Dragons, and probably the Holy Knights as well. They're a bit of a weird one. As of this recording, we don't know much about them. They could be really strong, or they could be 2 packs of ass. I couldn't tell you. Maybe 1 or 2 are stronger than the admiral, only time will tell. But we do know that the Gorosei, the 5 people running the world government, and Imu, the real main antagonist of the series, Luffy will defeat him, and I'm willing to bet that Zoro will fight and defeat Noosejuro. And if that's the case, Sanji will most most likely get an opponent with the Gorosei as well. And if we're to go based off trends, Zoro always fights the second strongest, while Sanji fights the third strongest within the organization, and the Gorosei are the main hands of Imu, so it makes a lot of sense for Zoro and Sanji to be the ones to defeat at least one member. Who it could be, I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's Marcus, maybe it's the young one, God knows. Sanji did promise back in Thriller Bark, although he doesn't have much of a name now, he will become one of the most dangerous threats in the Straw Hat crew, and these guys will eventually take down the world government. And with his potential and bloodline and being a part of the future Pirate King crew, I do think his threat will definitely become a reality. So I think Sanji's final bounty will be in the 3 billion range, maybe 3,333,000,000. Why so exact? Well, Sanji is usually associated with the number 3, and Oda loves his little inside jokes, especially with the bounties. Reflecting not only his strength, his potential, and threat, Sanji, through his actions and his bounty, will finally prove to the world and his family that he's a lot more valuable than they could ever imagine. And when it comes to his ceiling, well, in Sanji's future, I don't think he has a ceiling, as I believe the sky is the limit.